My name's Bernadette Murphy. I'm the founder and lead developer here at Cedar Street Agency. We're a low-code agency based in Australia. We've been around for about 3 years. I'm going to just start really quickly by introducing myself and talking a bit about, why maybe you want to listen to a little bit of what I'm about to talk about. So as you can see, I come from sort of like a weird zombie vampire family. But professionally, I have a Bachelor of IT and a Master's of IT, as well as my MBA. I've got nearly 20 years of experience working in tech, in big tech. I worked in tech consulting at KPMG for over 5 years, which I think in regular job terms, that's like 35 years. It certainly felt like that. I've delivered big multi-year tech projects for the Australian government and the Canadian government, which are now used in 27 countries all around the world in 5 different languages. I've led teams of 35 plus developers, BI analysts, PMs, testers, and I've led teams which supported a $6 billion a year e-com website in the US. So I guess a few years ago when I pivoted, into the low code world and started the Cedar Street Agency, the joy that I now get having the ability to kind of build products myself and with my team is just so incredible. But I definitely bring into that those years of experience into all the work we do. But one of the key areas I think that gives us a competitive advantage is our ability to do really strong estimates and write really, really strong proposals. So we win around or just over 50% of the proposals that we submit. And that includes via the RFP process of the Bubble portal. So in talking to some of the other agency heads, around the ridges, that's a pretty good success rate. So we've obviously got a really great process. And, like it or not, every single one of us here is in the business of delivering products for customers and clients. And so you can be the best developer in the world, but if you can't win work and deliver that work in a sustainable way, in a profitable way, then you're not going to be in the business very long. So it's a really critical thing that you kind of need to get good at. And if you're starting out, you may want to use some of the, tips and tricks that hopefully will be helpful today to kind of, kick that process forward for you because it's really important. So that's what I'm going to talk about. That's what I'm here. That's why you should potentially listen to me. The way that I've structured today's session is I'm going to kind of run through the standard inclusions in one of our typical proposals. So I like to think of a good proposal as a blend of art and science. So I say art and not sales because I absolutely hate sales. And if you're anything like me, selling or sales just gives you the absolute shivers, and I would just run a mile from anything that even remotely resembles that. But unfortunately, there is an element of that in this, and it is about, promoting, yourself and your work and why you are the best candidate to deliver this particular product for the client. So the first half of our proposals, section 1 to 4, are usually, that art and promotion side. And then the second half, which is where I'm going to spend the majority of my time today, is the science side, which is how do you go about defining your scope and those estimates and actually quantifying the effort involved. And then using that to build up your timeline and your financials, your budgets. And then hopefully, getting that all important signature at the end where the client signs on to engage with you to do the work. So that's kind of the structure of today. One really important thing that I am going to talk about is how our estimate process, the way that we do our estimating, leads directly into our delivery. So we don't do our estimates kind of in a vacuum, and then once the client signs on, throw them out, and then we start delivery separately. The whole thing flows, very seamlessly through so that as soon as that client signs on, we are ready to actually start delivering. And we've got our backlog there. It's already been scoped. It's already been sized, and we're ready to start those first prioritization conversations and start delivering. So we use a product called Jira to manage all of our estimates and our delivery. You could do all of the things that I'm talking about today in Excel, in a Word document, in a whiteboard, however you like to do it. It's not tool specific. It's just, a technique, an approach, and you can adapt it up or down depending on the size of your projects. So that's kind of what I'm going to cover today. I'm going to try to be as fast as I can so I can leave as much time at the end for questions in case anyone has any questions. But hopefully what I've just described means you're in the right place. So I am going to now jump out of PowerPoint into Canva, if I can find it. Where is it? There's our lovely co-host there, Kelly. Sorry about that, Kelly. You've got a little bit of a shout out on the screen.
Brilliant.
Sorry about that.
Perfect.
So yes, so I'm going to start by talking through. I've jumped into Canva. This is the tool that we use to create all of our proposals. It's a great tool to create something that looks professional and polished without too much effort. I realized as I was creating this presentation that I'm talking about two very famous Australian-based tech products in Atlassian, Jira, and Canva. I don't know what that says about me being Australian and if I've got inherent bias, but we use those tools. They're very, very good if you haven't tried them. They kind of, Canva in particular allows you to present something that's really polished. There's 1,000 different templates that you can choose to create something that looks, right for your particular clients and your particular work. So I'll start off by talking about the art side first, and this is the first 4 sections of our proposal. These sections don't change much between engagements. So once you've got these sections kind of locked and you've got all of the content written and you're really happy with it, that's something that you can reuse over and over and over again. You don't have to recreate it. So we include a little spiel about us. We talk about our values, who we are, why we do what we do. We might change this up a little bit depending on who the client is. Like I think this example was taken from an environmental management company proposal. So we talked a little bit about our sustainability focus. But this is really just about, talking to people about who we are as a company and what are our values. We talk about our approach, right? Like, so we use a sprint-based system. Most clients, some are more or less familiar with this, but we talk about, this is why we use this approach because we find it is very effective and it can help us deliver value very quickly. It doesn't, require a lot of upfront requirements and design and things like that. So they kind of get a bit of a sense of how we will be going about delivering. We talk in very specific terms around how will we communicate with you over a project. We run sprint-based models. We would be setting up weekly sessions with you over Zoom. We would be demoing the work we've done in the prior week. We would be planning the work that we're going to be doing in the following week. We use a project management tool called Basecamp to coordinate all of our projects. Basecamp is not an Australian company, so I realize we're going to have to, change that immediately. But, they get a sense of exactly what an engagement with us will look like. So that kind of gives them that comfort that they know what what to expect. We occasionally include a little bit about why bubble. It depends how the request has come through. This one did not come through the Bubble portal. And so we had to kind of put in here a little bit about why we chose Bubble as the right platform. We obviously wouldn't include this if it had come as an RFP through the Bubble platform. This particular client had some questions in their RFP around the security of the platform. And so we chose to address them specifically here. We've got a set of pages that kind of define some of the particular features of Bubble, and we, interchangeably will include them or not include them depending on the engagement. We also include, a kind of quick overview of our portfolio. Again, we've got these kind of already lined up so we can pick and choose the relevant pieces to include. And it's not particularly long. I don't like to go into a lot of detail here. If they want to find out more information around our portfolio, we can show them those things. But this section, which is around half of the proposal, like I talked about, it does not change very much. So once you have that first half of your proposal created, you can keep reusing it from proposal to proposal. That doesn't change very much. So that's the art side of, or the promotion and sales side of the proposal. The part that does change significantly engagement to engagement is the engagement overview. And this is where we're starting to talk about the science of defining exactly what we're going to be delivering. And we always start with scope statements. So people do this in a lot of different ways. You've probably seen this done in 1,000 different ways. There's tons of different methodologies around defining scope. We have found that during the proposal stage, very simple user statements has been the most effective way of communicating this with the client. So we go through the process of writing statements in the format of users can. So we would just go about defining who are the key users that are going to be interacting with the system, either imports or drawing outputs out of the tool. So, usually clients will forget about, any other user types apart from their end user. But usually there's two other user types that we need to talk about. One is any user type that's going to be taking information out of the tool or the system, whether that's just exporting information for them to be able to consume, whether that's reporting, whether that's admin analytics and dashboarding. There's always somebody that's consuming information out of the system that has an interest in it. The second type of user that the client always forgets about is the administrator role. So that can take different forms, but we've never built a product that does not have an administrator function in some way, shape, or form. So either we're building a dedicated administration portal as a part of the tool where admins can be set up with access, they can actually go in, they can create products, edit products, review, approve, whatever it is that they're doing in the tool. Or if the client is taking ownership of the Bubble product directly and they're planning on just managing it in Bubble, then obviously we need to say that is how they're going to be doing that, and we need to make sure they're set up to do that as well. So this is our scope, our functional requirements section here. It's very succinct. I think from memory, this engagement was like a $30,000 to $50,000 engagement, and so even at that scale, even at the scale of a larger size project, it's a very succinct way of defining what's included in the scope. The second page, so this is literally a two-page thing. We probably could have fit it on one page if we'd really kind of got rid of some of this stuff up here. But the second important part of starting these conversations around scope is the non-functional requirements. So the first section is talking about what the system can do. The second part is talking about the quality and standards to which we have to build the system. So I have found that there is a huge range of understanding from clients when they use the words MVP. When people say MVP, they can mean anything from a semi-functional prototype that doesn't really work behind the scenes but is sufficient for them to pitch to investors, all the way through to like a production ready live in the market product that live customers will be using and transacting with. So the amount of work and effort required to deliver products at both ends of that spectrum is hugely different. It's really important to define the quality or the standards that you are delivering your product to in this section here. This is also where you would define any of the performance requirements, the security requirements, privacy, any integrations, like any of the standards and expectations around the build. This is where you would call them out here in this non-functional requirements section. And the final part here is probably the most important, which says this is what we're not delivering as a part of this project. So again, there's a lot of assumptions that clients will have around what's included. A lot of the time they assume it includes things around like logo, design, branding, very complicated and involved wireframing work that they assume is just included, which actually we would need to call out separately. So, testing. Clients never think about how much testing is going to be involved, and it's such an important part of the work that we deliver. And so the degree of testing is so important to include here. Either call it out or include it in your scope. So they're basically the three inclusions that we would typically have in a standard engagement. For our team now, we are able to gather this level of detail via whatever the initial submission from the client was. So either that's through the Bubble portal, through an inquiry on our website or an email. and one Zoom conversation. So this process does not have to be long, especially once you've done it a few times. This process is quick, it is succinct. Once you've done it a few times, you will learn the questions that you need to ask to get to the right answers, to say something's in or out, making sure you're drawing out all of that information from the client. But this is not an onerous process. It's usually one email or submission via the Bubble portal. And if it's coming via the Bubble portal, it's probably incredibly woeful and has very limited information in it. If anybody's ever seen what comes through there, it's absolute garbage most of the time. But then that one Zoom conversation and we can draw all of the information out. And that's the starting point of the estimation process. The second stage, and I'm going to jump out of Canva now into Jira, still saying very Australian based. And we start to actually define the blocks of work or the pieces of work that we would have to undertake in order to meet those requirements. So I didn't create a test project. I haven't done this. So this is an in-flight project that I'm going to use as an example. And it's probably got a little bit more detail in it than we would typically have at an estimate stage. But it's still relevant to illustrate the process. So we would just start pulling out our major kind of modules and components that we know we have to build. We talk about epics, or just the large kind of groupings of functionality that we know we would have to build. Usually we get to around 8 to 10 in a usual project. That's around the right level we find typically. Then under each one of those modules, we would start to, under each of those epics, we would start to define, okay, here are all of the individual tasks of things that we know we need to build, right? So again, keep in mind, this is an in-flight project, so it looks a little bit different than it does during the estimate process. But this is effectively what we would do. So we would just start calling out all the things that we know we need to build. We know we need to build user sign up and login. We know we need to build landing page. We know we need to build out admin dashboard. We know we need to build out, these integrations, like all of the pieces that we know we need to build. We just start listing them out. I think I mentioned in my intro, we use Jira to do this. You could easily use Excel. It's just any project that you can use to create any program that you can use to create a list. That's it. So once you've got all of those reasonably well fleshed out, the next step, which is the key, is that for each one of these, we're going to be assigning a t-shirt size. So the t-shirt size concept is really good, I find, for estimations, because it means you don't have to know to the nth degree how big something is, but you just give it a bit of an estimate, right? So our t-shirt sizes that we assign to each one of our work items are micro, which is less than an hour. We don't usually have a lot of those in estimations. That usually comes in delivery when we've got like quick wins or small fixes that we can make. Extra small, which is less than half a day, small, which is less than a day, medium, less than 3 days, large, which is around a week, and extra large, which is greater than a week. So I find it's quite simple to kind of categorize each one of the work items into one of these categories. The non-functional requirements around quality, around performance and security and privacy, and all of those non-functional requirements will feed into these estimates. So if we're building an MVP, a true MVP, a prototype level, we would categorize a lot of the tasks as quite small. But if we're building something that is production ready, a lot of those tasks will take a lot longer and they would end up in the medium and sort of large category. But we just go through each one of our work items and we just give a bit of an estimate of what we think the t-shirt size is. We've got a great dashboard that we've built that allows us to visualize this really easily then once we've done that, so that we can see, okay, this is how many micros we've got, this is how many extra smalls, this is how many mediums, etc. These are the ones that we haven't scoped yet. You can see here that we haven't got any large and extra large, and that's because I'm really strict about trying to not have too many of those, because we run weekly sprints. If there's something we think is around a week, we probably need to, break it up into smaller tasks so that we're not giving somebody just one single giant task to deliver for the week. So, we try to not have some of those. If you find that you've got a lot of larges and extra larges in your list, it may be okay for estimation purposes, but once you get into delivery, you're probably going to want to be able to break those down into smaller chunks. So we take each one of the pieces that we've, provided our t-shirt size to, and we literally just add them up. So there is no magic kind of formula that you have to apply or overlay on this in any way. We literally just add this up. And you might have noticed that you can see that the t-shirt sizes are all in an up to format. So by default, that includes a degree of contingency. So you can decide the amount of contingency you think you want to, and how kind of cautious or aggressive you want to be in those estimates. And you can kind of back yourself one way or the other. But we use around a 20% contingency. That's what would kick something up into another size range. But it automatically includes contingency. So that gives us a level of comfort when we're delivering. It gives the client a level of comfort when they're signing up to the estimate or to the proposal, that they know what they're getting, and there's a little bit of contingency built in, that it's going to be, at most this much. So we then take those estimates and those numbers that we've got here, and we use that to build out our timeline and our financial estimates here. So if you're a freelancer and you just work for yourself, then it's super easy, because you're just multiplying effort by your rate, and then spinning out a number at the end. If you have different types of resources in your teams, like we do, we've got junior developers, we've got senior developers, we've got UX designers, each of whom have different rates, then it's a little bit more complicated, because we then have to overlay a resource assignment to each of those tasks, so that then we can get a final financial number for the client in our estimate. That's something, obviously that comes when you're slightly larger, but if you're an individual, then this process should be quite quick. We do create all of these estimates in a spreadsheet outside of Jira and Canva in terms of the calculations. We have our standard rate embedded in a table, and we just, do all of the multipliers out, and then we get to this final number. In terms of the timeframes, again, if you're an individual and you've got full 100% capacity, or never give yourself 100% capacity, always estimate 80% capacity at most. If you've got, full capacity available, then again, this is very quick, because you've estimated via your t-shirt sizes, it's going to take 30 days of effort, over this many weeks, it's this many weeks. If you have different types of resources in your team, again, you're going to have to overlay that with capacity. So, if you've got junior developer who's 80% available, if you've got senior developer 20%, UX developer 20%, whatever it is, you need to kind of lay those out over a bit of a timeline, so that you can give to the client, this is how quickly we believe we can deliver the product. So that's a little bit, a higher level of kind of planning that you need to do if you've got multiple resources. But again, for an individual, super quick, it's going to take me 6 weeks to deliver this. And this is how I got to this estimate. So that is another kind of powerful component of going through this process, is that the client isn't just seeing a number at the end and thinking, how on earth did they get to that number? They understand, they have visibility and transparency of how you have built up that number. And if there are concerns around cost, or why is it costing so much, then you've got something you can go back to, and you can say, well, we need to include significant testing resources because of X, Y, and Z, or we need to, these are the tasks involved in building out that feature. And so that's why it's going to take us this long. So you've got that as a bit of a backup that you can have in those negotiations. And we've found that most clients are completely reasonable. So if you can show them that you've gone through this process, and that your estimates are reasonable, and that you haven't tried to overinflate anything, most clients are understanding, and they'll be happy to see that you've gone through that effort to get to the estimate, the financial estimate. So we include a small amount of assumptions, very light terms and conditions, which our lawyers hate, because they, worry about us way more than we worry about ourselves, but we don't like having big, long T's and C's in our proposals. Hopefully getting a signature from our client, and we would include obviously our invoices at the end for them to make payment. I just want to talk really quickly now about how we then take, assuming we win the work, assuming we're ready to start delivery, how we then take those estimates and use them to kind of manage or kick off the delivery process. So again, we use Jira, don't have to use that, use another tool, use whatever you like, however you want to manage your processes. But we would then move this backlog from just looking at a size perspective to now looking at a ranking and prioritization process. So we would then, because we've done our work, we know how much things are going to take, we know what resources we're going to be allocating to our tasks. we would then go about the process of saying, okay, for sprint 1, we have X volume of capacity. What tasks are going to be above the line that we're going to be delivering for week 1 that we're going to demo for the client in that first sprint planning meeting? So we could then go through the process with the client of saying, in week 1, we're going to be delivering these 10 tasks, right? This is our capacity line. This is what we're going to be delivering. And then once we've delivered that and we demoed it, we review what we've delivered. Did we deliver it all or not? And then we would go through the process of reprioritization. So this backlog is ever evolving, ever changing, ever moving, but it's there right from the beginning. So we can start using it for prioritization conversations from our first sprint planning meeting. And that can be the Monday after they signed the contract. So again, going through this process really helps to kickstart our delivery side of things. We use these views to prioritize our tasks. With this particular view is grouped by epic. You could have a single backlog. So we do have views where I think, you could do single backlog prioritization if you don't want to use epics to break them out per module. I just find that it's quite easy to kind of think about things that are connected to certain features of the product itself. But again, you could just have a single backlog that you use for prioritization and sprint planning. And once the project gets going and you find out new things about what's actually going to be involved, then that backlog is a living thing and it continues to evolve. But the client has full transparency, you have full transparency. It just provides everybody with a level of comfort that things are on track, or if they're not on track, then this is why, and this is what's holding it up. So we find that's really helpful to help kickstart delivery. You can scale this down to make your own simple Kanban board in whatever tool you prefer to use, but that process works really well for us. So I think I'm going to stop talking now, and I'm going to actually open it up to any questions. Is that possible for you to do, Kelly? Can I do that?
I think people can raise their hand and then we can unmute them.
I'm going to stop sharing my screen then so I can see people. Oh, there we go.
Yeah. So you guys, if you have the raise your hand thing is on the bottom in the center-ish. It looks like that. And you look like you're raising your hand.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
If anyone, if you have any questions later on, obviously feel free to reach out direct. Okay, that's a question.
So that's ready.
Hold
on, trying to find you. How do I do this?
Thanks for the
Hi.
presentation. Do you hear me clearly?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So thanks for the presentation. Is it possible at the end of your presentation to get the recording and the convert?
We'll have the recording.
Yeah.
After.
So I will make the recording available afterwards so that you can go back and revisit anything. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. Thanks.
I thought there was someone else.
I think it was me.
Oh, that was you. Okay. Any other questions? If you don't have any other questions, I hope that was helpful. Hopefully you took away some nugget of information there that would be helpful to you in your delivery processes. Aziz has a question.
Okay. Aziz, I think you can unmute yourself.
There you go.
Yes, hello.
Hi,
Thank you so
Aziz.
much for the presentation. It's very helpful. Just my question was about sprint planning. So you said 1 week sprints.
Yeah.
And how do you decide on, do you have a specific number of medium sizes to go with micro and so on? If you can shed some light about this. Thank you.
Yeah, so we typically use weekly sprints because we feel like that keeps momentum going. If sometimes we don't, we use fortnightly or bi-weekly, every 2 weeks, however you say it. It just depends on the particular client and their availability and all of those kind of things. We don't have a requirement to say we need to include 2 mediums and only 4 micros and 5 smalls. We could have, just 2 larges included in a particular sprint. It's just the total amount of effort that is the important number. So making sure that we've got, if we've got this much effort and capacity available, then this is, how much has been allocated for that particular weekly sprint. So we're not over allocating any of our devs or any of our resources with work. So there's no right mix of tasks. So we could have a sprint that's got lots of small tasks, or we could have a sprint with only a few large tasks. Hopefully that answers your question.
Haren?
Yeah.
Yes. Hello, thank you for this. I'm learning a lot here. I have a quick question. I don't know if it's easy, if it could be answered, but when you make the prices for the clients, 2 questions. Usually, how close is your prices correct? Either if it's usually it's too high or too low, and to protect yourself when you have a price, do you try to always give a little bit more so you have leeway when it comes to working and your developers are all happy? And that's the question.
Yeah. It's always low. I have never overestimated the amount of work that's involved. It is always underestimating because things just, happen during a project and in delivery. I think, like I mentioned, our estimates always include a degree of contingency. It's around 20% of the total amount. So that's just built into our estimates. But even then, there's always things that come out that weren't originally identified during scoping that will add cost and effort on top of what you've already quoted to them. And so you would need to have those, follow-up conversations, 6 weeks into delivery that actually, when we talked about the analytics dashboard at the start, you mentioned it was going to be something really simple. Now it's evolved into something very complex and we have to have more resources involved. So now our estimate for that feature is, 2 weeks instead of 1 week. So there's going to be an increase in cost and effort for you there. So the estimation process helps to get the initial sort of sizing, but then very often, you have to come back and have following conversations with them to say it's going to take longer. But again, if you've got the data there, the estimates there that kind of back up what you're saying, then they're usually very reasonable in understanding why that is going to take a little bit more. I think if you came to them and just said, look, it's taking longer than we thought, with no estimate to back it up, then they'd probably balk at that and they wouldn't want to sign up. I could also spend an entire session talking about profitability, because that is a whole other challenge for working in this world. Like delivering projects and actually achieving a profit without just eating into your resources is just so so difficult. And I think we could have a whole other conversation about that. So if you want to find out more about that, you can message me afterwards and we can have a chat. But that estimation and the pricing conversation does change as the project goes on.
Do you think that's specific to like the agency model versus freelance? Because you have overhead that freelancers maybe don't have.
I think so, although I'm sure it's the case in freelancing as well. I think, anyone who's in this business really wants to do a good job for the client. And so you want to deliver the best possible product and the outcome. The client obviously would love to pay the least amount for that product. So there's just a natural tension, I think, in the supply and demand relationship, whether it's with an agency or a freelancer, that they're always going to want to pay less for your services. I definitely think low code delivery is very undervalued. And, clients expect something to be delivered for a much lower price than what it's actually going to cost. And the skills that it takes to deliver low code products are exactly the same skills that it takes to build products, period. I think that hopefully as the industry matures and the value gets more recognized, clients will be willing to pay a higher rate for these services. Definitely agencies also have the additional overhead of supporting staff and contractors who you are obliged to pay no matter what. So there is that additional risk to your profitability around, okay, well, I'm still paying my developers even though we've given this sort of estimate to the client. And that's on the agency owner, I think, to then renegotiate back to the client and say, look, it is taking a bit longer than we thought. And so we need to charge you more for that work. Otherwise, you will end up in a situation where you're making absolutely no money in an agency for sure.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know. I wonder if everybody else feels like this whole world is very undervalued in the market, because I certainly do. Andy?
Andy.
First of all, tremendously informative session, probably one of the best sessions all day today. Thank you very much for that.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and I'd love to have that deck as a cheat sheet to be able to take and present to the world, pretending that I actually did it. But my question.
I love that you're just earning up to plagiarism. That's great.
Why not? If Harvard and MIT can do it, I can do it too.
Yeah, sure.
But my question is actually, I noticed like the scoping section was very, very brief, right? It was very concise. And you know, the what's not included was very concise. And I wonder if that's deliberate as far as like, because you said like invariably like something will come up, right? That's out of scope.
Yeah.
And I feel like if you are much more of a stickler in defining the scope and like, but you know, just like just battening up the hatch and making sure that there's no misunderstandings, that you avoid that issue. But then I wonder if it's a balance between that and like losing the contract, right? Because if you're being too much of a stickler at the get-go, so I'm just curious about that balancing act and what you think about that.
It's totally a balancing act. And I have been in projects where we've spent a lot of time and energy in really trying to define every single detail up front. And, you know, even then, we've still had challenges where things have changed whilst you're in delivery. So with the agile delivery model as well, I think, you know, it's important to be as specific and you know, make sure you've got as much coverage as possible upfront. But I do think there to a point, but then I do think beyond that, it's just wasted effort and time, because you could spend weeks thinking about all of the possible scenarios that you need to include or exclude in the scope and still miss something in delivery. So I think we try to keep it I think it was actually deceptively short. Like, it is short and it is deliberately succinct, but it is usually quite comprehensive and it does include the majority of things. I think I just try to stay away from very, you know, verbose, long, you know, scope statements, because it just confuses everybody. And I think, again, like you said, the client can get quite, you know, off-put by signing into something that is that level of, you know, you were saying stickler or detail.
Right.
So yeah, it definitely is a balancing act for sure. And you know, sometimes it is client to client. Like, if you've had conversations with a client up front, you get a sense of what they're looking for. Like, we've had clients, say, in the commercial property space, who come from like where contracts are like very, very tight, like watertight contracts, very, very detailed, and they want that from their proposals. So they want very specific detail. They want lots of inclusions, exclusions, things like that. Whereas clients in other industries, you know, they're happy with something that is succinct and has sufficient detail, but acknowledges that in delivery, you know, some additional things will come out.
Right. And I know that, but that's literally what you showed is literally what you present to the client.
Yeah.
Take it or leave it. So there's no flows, user journeys, mock-ups, wireframes, none of that stuff.
Not in estimate, no, usually not. It does depend, like, again, what they expect. Like, we've been in official RFP processes for government contracts where we have been required to provide more information than that. But typically, no, we don't do that, because all of that work is somebody doing that work, right? We want to include that in the scope of the project. So especially wireframing, like, people think wireframing is like a quick mock-up, whatever. That is a specialist skill set that if you're spending significant time doing that before you've even signed the contract, that's kind of, you know, can potentially end up being lost effort and lost time and money.
Yeah, you don't bill for the scoping, right? Like others do.
No.
Like, they'll bill for the scoping and they'll cook that in, or they'll, you know, make that payment, you know, apply towards the project.
Yeah, no, we don't bill for scoping. I mean, that's interesting. We haven't, maybe because we keep it quite light.
Right.
But if we were going to get into like a lot of detail and almost like semi-design work, maybe it would make sense to then you know, retroactively go back and bill for it up front.
Right.
when they
And
sign
last
up.
question, I don't mean to hog, I'm so sorry, and I appreciate your time. Last question, and I'll shut up. So you, like that lack of detail and scoping and user flows, user journeys, all that stuff, doesn't that impact your ability to come up with numbers that you feel confident in, not, lessening the risk to you, quoting out something that might be much bigger than you anticipate because you haven't gone through that?
I mean, maybe it's because I've got years of experience behind me that I feel confident when I'm writing scope statements and we're doing our estimating in Jira, that I do feel like I'm comfortable that we've included everything or not. Whereas if I was kind of new in the industry, maybe I would want that additional degree of like analysis and design to feel comfort with it. So I think it probably just depends what level you're at and where, what would give you that degree of comfort that you have, not underestimated the amount of work that's going to be involved. But we don't find that this is a problem for us in our agency, but 100%, like if you feel like you need to do more detail up front, then definitely that might be the right formula for you guys to use.
Thank you so much.
Ready? You want to come up?
Hey, Ruddy.
Thanks, Bernadette. So my question, you already have a situation. Yeah, do you hear me?
It's kind of hard to hear you, to be honest. Do you want to
Hello,
maybe
do you
reach
hear
out?
me?
Do you want to maybe reach out to me afterwards and I can answer it offline?
Have a situation. You. Okay, great.
Thanks.
Are you ready? A little bad connection, I think.
Sorry, yeah, I couldn't hear you. It was very echoey. Yeah, so just going back to that previous question, like I have worked on projects where we've done super detailed UML diagrams and like detailed requirement specs, and it's probably, it's good to do that for like the large waterfall delivery projects, but in this case, the way that we're delivering products, it just doesn't feel like it's necessary, and it just definitely feels like it would take a lot of time and effort to kind of create and maintain during the estimation processes. If we feel like we want to create those as a part of the design stage, then definitely we could, but we just don't include those things.
I have a question about testing. You mentioned
yeah,
it.
God, we could talk about testing all day. It's so important and it's so underestimated.
Yeah, and it's hard to plan, and it's also hard to involve the client in.
Yep.
Do you involve the client in testing?
Absolutely, yeah. In later stages of testing, for sure. So we do like functional unit testing, obviously in delivery, and then but once we've got something that is sort of functional and has end-to-end flow that they can follow, we want them in and testing themselves, and eventually getting customers and clients to test if they can. That's such an important part. That's where we probably find the amount of bugs and issues that come up when you move from using test data to using live production data is incredible. Like we've built the most perfect product in our test environment, and then we push it live and it starts to get live user information and we go, oh shit, like this does not work with the type of data that's coming in and the way that the users are actually using it. So the earlier you can get that type of information into your development processes, the better, because we've had in early days, we've had lots of problems where we've created test data that fit nicely into our format and our way of thinking of things. Live customer data, totally different. Didn't fit our formula at all, and so we've had to kind of completely go back and rejig things once it's gone live. So that's a lot of wasted effort and time. So if you can get customers and clients using it live early, definitely do that.
Do you have a tool for logging bugs and for testing?
We use Jira. for logging our bugs. We don't have a good tool for testing. If anyone has a good tool for testing, I'd like to hear it because we've tried different things. We don't have a good tool for writing test cases and, running automated testing through systems. So if people have suggestions, please tell me afterwards. But we kind of run it pretty, I guess, in-house just via our development processes. And the testing would become tasks in our backlog.
Yeah.
So
I can recommend Jam for
Jam. Yeah.
Jam is great for just like sort of quick screenshots that feed into Jira or whatever
Yeah.
your system is. We found that really helpful.
Yep. That's really good. But yeah, customer testing, real live customer data, get it into your processes as early as you can because it will save you a lot of rework.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Anyone else? I will make the recording available afterwards if you want to go back and revisit it, if you want to share it with anyone else who think would get value out of it. Otherwise, thank you so much for listening, attending. I really appreciate it. Thanks, Kelly, for co-hosting.
Yeah, thanks, Bernadette. Amazing.
Yeah,
So good.
and we had no porn. No porn
Yeah.
interruptions. Yay. It's a low
Good for
bar for
us.
success. It's a low bar for success. No porn interruptions. So that's great.
Anyone who's just chiming in, we had porn throughout the day. So unintentional. It wasn't a part of the session.
Yeah.
Oh, Lord. All right.
Okay. Thank you so much, everybody. I'm going to end the call and yeah, just feel free to reach out to me later on. I've got my contact information, I think, in the session, so you can obviously reach out to me. But otherwise, yeah, search for me on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye.
Great.
Bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
guys. Bye-bye.